Through brutal betrayal, rose an army, fighting for a world where no soul suffers in silence. From the group that brought you Desmond's Law, join us as we shield every paw from cruelty. Welcome to the Desmond's Army podcast, Animal Advocacy Unleashed.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 7 of the Desmond's Army podcast. I'm your host, Matt Caron. Today, I am joined by our wonderful, hardworking, amazing, stupendous, any other adjectives you'd like me to use? Vice President Linda Paliva. Hi, Linda. How you doing?
Hi, Matt. Thank you. I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing good. I love that picture above your head behind you on the wall there. It's a great photo.
Yes, thank you to everyone. I love the photo. I love where I was able to place it. It's a constant, nice reminder of Roscoe.
Absolutely. Well, what we want to do is thank everybody for joining us today for episode 7. Hard to believe we've done 7 episodes so far of our podcast, and you can watch them all on any streaming platform that you prefer. So just to give you a little rundown, we're on Facebook, we're on Instagram, we are on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcast. Just search Desmond's Army and the Desmond's Army podcast, and we will pop right up. You can find us there. You can do video and audio or just audio. And every episode is unique and different, and we're covering different topics, so you don't have to watch them all in sequence. Just pop right in whenever you'd like. We've established a dedicated email, desmondspodcast@gmail.com. That's desmondspodcast@gmail.com. Send us a message. Tell us what you like, what you don't like. Ask us a question. And we are checking that, and we will try and cover all of those things. And today we have a very special episode, very timely episode too, Linda, because a few weeks ago, Desmond's Army was up at the Capitol. We had a day where we were meeting with legislators and really trying to push 3 or 4 priorities that Desmond's Army has, right?
Absolutely. And we seem to have gotten a little bit of a foothold in there this year, which I'm really, really happy about.
Yes, and we have a lot of friends in the animal advocacy community from different organizations who are behind us. And it really does, that old saying, I mean, it takes a village. It really, truly does, especially to get legislation across the finish line. Every voice matters. Every vote of support matters. Every piece of testimony matters. So we encourage people to stay engaged throughout this process. You can complain all day long, and you have a right to do that, and that's fine. But advocate, use your voice. So that is a good setup, I think, to bring on our guest. What do you think, Lynn? Did you want to tell us a little bit about our guest here?
We have Joshua Levin, is the legislative advocacy manager for Connecticut Votes for Animals. Joshua is so well-versed and so well-spoken on all animal-related legislation. And he can help us to dive into some of these bills a little bit more than I can. And I hope that he'll be able to help everyone understand what's going on there up at the Capitol.
Awesome. All right. Yeah, let's bring Joshua right on. He's hiding backstage. Here he is. Hi, Joshua.
Hi, Joshua.
Hi, Matt. Hi, Linda. I appreciate your kind words. Thank you.
So, Joshua, let's start here, because I think the legislative process for some people can be intimidating, right? Maybe people don't know how to engage, if their voice matters. So as someone who's knee deep in this every day, advocating for animals and different pieces of legislation at the Capitol, I guess give someone a reason to come out and participate in the process.
That's a great point, because the legislative process is so incredibly confusing and frankly daunting for somebody that wants to get in but doesn't know how to. If I could sum it up in one sentence, right, on why someone should, it is our elected officials are elected to serve you, right? They have these positions of power. And so when you go there and you sit and you're testifying and you're getting ready, the nerves start to grow, the anxiety starts to grow, but you got to remind yourself that they are there to serve you. And I think for me, because even when I'm up there, it still is daunting from time to time. I remind myself that, and it really does help ease those nerves. And really quickly, your voice matters tremendously. And the perfect example of that was from a bill last year. It was on rabbit farming expansion in the state. And every indication was that this bill was going to pass. The public hearing came, 7 pieces of testimony were submitted in support of that bill. 586 pieces of testimony were submitted in opposition to that bill, and the bill died. And that is because people used their voice and they spoke out. When we went and tried to talk with legislators about that bill after the public hearing, nobody wanted to say anything about it. They did not want to get near that bill because it was tabooed, right? It was tabooified, right? So I think that's a perfect example of how people's voice really does matter. Every individual voice matters.
That's a great example. In terms of what you do and your organization, CT Votes for Animals, you can look them up. Tell us about your role and your mission. What are you doing at the Capitol?
I am up at the Capitol lobbying. I am lobbying for pro-animal welfare legislation. I am looking to strengthen animal protections across the state. Sometimes that comes in the form of some offensive campaigns, like trying to get Desmond's law expanded, which we will certainly dive into shortly. Other times they are defensive campaigns, like looking to prevent bear hunting legalization or a rollback on regulations regarding the killing of bears. And so it's kind of twofold there. I love my job.
There's a bear bill every session, is there?
Every single year. For at least the past 10 years, there has been a bill looking to, in some way, shape, or form, make it easier to kill bears. And it just gets so frustrating because we say the same thing over and over, that humans are the problem. Humans are the problem, right? Bears are just doing bear things. Humans are the reason that human-bear conflicts happen. And so it does get frustrating that it just continues to come up year after year.
Yeah. And Senator Minor, if I remember correctly, I don't think he's serving anymore, but he was the big one on the bears, right? And I thought it would kind of go away now that he's not in there. But sure enough, there's a bear bill every year. I think we're going to talk about bears, but might as well. I mean, yeah, you're right, Joshua. I mean, they get habituated, right? Just based on people leaving their trash cans out, they encroach on society. And it's a big issue.
Yeah. Yeah, and going and killing bears, it's really hard sometimes to distinguish between a mama bear and just, your regular old male bear. And so if you're out there and you hunt and you kill a mama bear, then you're just making the issue increase because you now have all these cubs who don't have a mom to teach them how to do proper bear things. And they're just going to follow their incredible nose to the nearest food source, which is almost always going to be humans. And there it is, right? The problem just continues to grow. So hunting doesn't solve the problem of bears encroaching upon human communities. It is education. It is proper sanitation. It's removing your bird feeder between the months of March and November, all those things and more.
I just read one of the things that, we're looking at putting out just an educational sheet on bear hunting. And one of, among those things that people can do to help stop the bear-human conflicts is when they see a bear coming towards their yard or whatever, many people want to just sit back and watch, stay in your house, look out the window, appreciate the beautiful view of a bear. But this said, don't do that. Scare this bear off with loud noises, bang pots and pans together, scare him away. And so that he doesn't become habituated, he gets scared instead. And I thought that was a wonderful suggestion because I don't think people do that. I think they sit and observe and enjoy watching nature.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. They're very smart. They're very intelligent. If they don't sense danger, they'll just continue to peruse at their leisure. Yeah.
Joshua, I'll just tell you a quick little story. When I was the political reporter, back when I worked for Fox 61, I was up at the state capitol. It was like a big animal welfare day. And of course, I'm, very passionate about animal welfare. So I was asking one of the legislators, how come there isn't really a big appetite, or at least there doesn't seem to be, to push for animal welfare legislation every year? And I won't say the name of the legislator, but it was a male. He looked at me, he goes, because animals don't vote. And I thought that was a very telling remark. But I will say animal advocates vote, people vote. And I think legislators this session, more than any other, are really getting the message that these issues matter to people. And I guess just give me your thoughts on that. Is there an appetite from what you've seen at the state capitol to move and get done animal welfare legislation?
For sure. Yeah. And that story really does sum up exactly what the issue is when it comes to animal welfare legislation. That's why your voice matters so much. Legislator constituents, if they are speaking about animal issues, then their legislators will do something. But this year, more than recent years, I think animal welfare is on top of mind because the Animal Advocacy Caucus is kind of back in full force. They kind of went behind the scenes for a little while for the last few sessions. It's been hard to really even figure out who is a part of the Animal Advocacy Caucus. But they held a really good public forum prior to the start of the session this year, with hundreds of people coming and speaking and sharing their thoughts on what they think should be the focus. And so that in and of itself really, really helped prime the animal welfare organizations for this session, knowing that there are legislators that we can rely on to get some of these bills passed.
Yes, absolutely. And for people who don't know, I mean, so you have the full legislature, you have House, you have the Senate, and then you have committees, and the committees all have, designated chairs and co-chairs and members. And then you have caucuses, which, to your point, Joshua, are a little bit more nebulous. They're just sort of these ad hoc formed groups of legislators that feel passionate about certain issues. Yes, we are lucky to have some great animal welfare caucus leaders who've partnered with us. Just thinking off the top of my head, I don't want to leave anybody out, but Carrie Wood has been involved in that process. Nicole Claridis Ditria. Let's see, who else? Ann Hughes has been a part of that. There's just so many. I'm sure I'm leaving out Kathy Kennedy.
Yep.
And the great part about these caucuses is they're bipartisan, right? And so maybe we talk about that next. I mean, if there's any issue, because everything is so polarized, so political in just the world that we live in, but animal welfare, that is not a political issue, is it, Joshua?
A partisan issue, right? It's not a partisan issue. This is something that, unlike healthcare or taxes or name any other, political issue out there, animal welfare more than any is supported by both sides of the aisle. So that is something that, we all can appreciate, that both Democrats and Republicans alike do in some way, shape, or form want to support animals, So it does make our job slightly easier, not easy, but slightly easier.
I think that this year especially, we've we attacked this a little bit more from a public safety issue with animal cruelty, in that, we're not talking about just animals. We're talking about the link and the fact that animal abusers are much more likely to hurt other people than others. I think that's helped this year.
I agree. The framing of the issue matters, and I think we did a good job of framing the animal cruelty crisis that Connecticut is currently facing in a way that makes it more than just animals. Yeah.
So, Linda, maybe I'll kick it over to you and have you tell all of our listeners and our viewers what HB 5264, which is the Desmond's Army expansion bill, is all about. Or I'll fill in the blanks, but I just thought it'd be nice if you could talk about some of what Desmond's Army's priorities have been for this legislative session.
And we do have priorities. And the number one priority this year is to expand Desmond's Law, as it should have been right from the beginning, to include all companion animals. I testified one year and I said, these animals hurt. They feel pain. They feel anxiety. They feel fear. Just because they're not a cat or a dog does not stop that from happening. The rabbit that's being, brutalized, the goat that's being starved to death, the horse that's being, punished for its behavior with brutal training methods. They all feel, they all hurt, and they all become anxious and, filled with anxiety the same way cats and dogs do. So we want this expanded to other animals. So that's our number one priority, as it should be. We see a lot of cases that involve other animals outside of cats and dogs that don't get.
I think it's about 40%, right,
Yes.
Linda?
Yes.
Desmond's Army did a study on this, 60% cats and dogs, but then 40%, and there's a pie chart, and it goes through the whole gamut from rabbits to fish to whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so we see it all. And, again, it hurts just as bad to see horses starving to death, literally starving to death, as it does to see a dog starving to death. It's just horrendous. And to know that they are not protected by way of an animal advocate just because of their species just doesn't make sense to us. So there's that. There is the big uptick in starvation. Everyone thinks that, oh, well, it's because our economy is where it's at and people can't afford to feed their animals and they can't afford vet care. I don't, to a certain extent, that's true. But my God, you're a pet owner. You can reach out for help. There's help available. So we want starvation to be an automatic felony offense. That is a very prolonged abuse. It doesn't happen overnight that an animal starves to death. It takes weeks, sometimes months. So that should definitely be listed as a felony.
Yeah. So again, it's House Bill 5264. And Joshua, I'll kick it over to you. Maybe tell us what this bill accomplishes, what it doesn't accomplish, and what the position of Connecticut Votes for Animals is on it.
Yeah. So House Bill 5264, Desmond's Law, to all companion animals. It does a few other things as well, but sticking to just Desmond's Law expansion, it maps out a definition for what a companion animal is, because right now Connecticut doesn't have that within our law. And I can go through a little bit and read what that is if you'd like. So it's a little long-winded, but I feel like it's necessary to kind of explain what this is. So the definition proposed in this law is a domesticated dog, cat, horse, rabbit, ferret, bird, rodent, fish, reptile, amphibian, or other species of animal kept for pleasure rather than utility, and that is normally kept in or near the household of its owner or keeper, and is dependent upon a person for food, shelter, and veterinarian care. And then there are carve-outs in this definition for all of these animals or species that are kept for farming or biomedical research practice. So CVA strongly supports this bill because, like you guys had just mentioned, 40% of all animal cruelty cases involve animals other than dogs and cats. Cruelty doesn't stop at just dogs and cats, so the law shouldn't stop at just dogs and cats. So we are happy with this definition. We certainly think that it could be expanded as well, but politics is a little, a game of small incremental wins. And so that's what this law would do. It would give us this would actually be a rather substantial win, and create, the path forward for greater improvements in animal safety. The reason why we support this bill so vehemently is because, and this is a lot of what I'm about to say is directly from Desmond's Army's research that they've put forth. Violence against animals is violence against people. And we need to shout that from the rooftops, right? Because not only is violence against animal violence against people, but animal abuse is a better predictor of like serious crimes like sexual assault than homicide, arson, or firearm convictions, right? So really animal cruelty is the warning sign for future violence. And we need to take it seriously. Desmond's Law expansion allows us to take that more seriously by having an advocate in place in more of these animal cruelty cases, because again, Desmond's Army research shows that cases with an advocate appointed result in more meaningful outcomes that hold the abuser accountable for their actions, more so than cases that don't have one.
Absolutely.
Just say something.
Go ahead, Linda.
Any attorneys out there that are listening to this podcast, we need you. We need you. Please, please consider becoming an animal advocate under Desmond's Law.
It's actually yes, that's a great point, because it's one thing to expand the law, right? But if you cover more animals, naturally, you're going to have more cases. You're going to need more attorneys.
What a noble,
wonderful
thing to do.
This is called, what do they call this typically, Joshua? Is it an omnibus bill, right? Where there's multiple components to it. I guess that's the technical term. And these omnibus bills, in your experience, is it give it like more of a chance or less of a chance of actually getting across the finish line?
It certainly depends on the bill, what it includes. In this case, I think grouping Desmond's Law expansion into a bill that talks about animals and insurance underwriting and increase in animal related offenses and like the charges that are being tacked onto to different types of offenses, as well as an animal cruelty task force. It served our best interest. Having this bill first be raised in the Insurance and Real Estate Committee, I think gave us a lot of a stronger foundation than had this bill been first initially raised in the Judiciary Committee.
Well, Joshua, one of the things that has always concerned me is, we have a part-time legislature. It's just the way that it is. Some sessions are longer sessions, other sessions are shorter. We're in a short session. So there's really urgency here. Every day matters. Do you think that this is a priority bill? Looking into your crystal ball, I know you don't have all the answers, but is it a priority bill for legislators?
I think for certain legislators, yes. I'm not too sure about whether House and Senate leadership are going to consider this a priority bill. That doesn't necessarily mean it won't receive some time, like some discussion time on the floor. But there are a lot of issues that leadership is currently addressing that relate to a lot of the changes in the federal landscape. And so I think those are more of the true priorities for both House and Senate leadership. These bills, like Desmond's law expansion and other bills addressing animal cruelty, are probably, I don't know, I think saying they're put on the back burner is making it sound a little too much like they're not taking it seriously. I know that they do think that this is a serious issue. Considering it a priority for them, though, probably not at this moment. In any other year, I think yes. But this I think is a much different year than typical.
Yeah, no,
we
that's
have
fair.
Some other things going on out there in the world. Us animal people kind of stick right to this little niche, but we know that there's been a lot of activity up at the Capitol this year on other subjects. But if we don't get it this year, it's really a good head start to the work we have to do next year.
Yeah, absolutely. Me going into it, I was saying if Desmond's law expansion can get a public hearing, that would be a win for this year. The first year, typically, that a bill gets proposed, and I say this often, you speak and they don't listen to you. The second year, you speak and they listen. The third year, you speak and they finally take action.
I think we're on year 3 for this.
Is it?
I think so.
Yeah. Well, that isn't 100%, appropriate for each individual topic, right. But broadly speaking, that's typically how it goes.
I'm not giving up. I think this can happen.
Absolutely.
We needed this bill yesterday. Yeah.
Going into it, that's what would have been considered a success for me. I think this bill has a very strong chance of passing. Based on conversations I've had, based on public remarks from Insurance and Real Estate Committee leadership, I do believe that this bill has a very strong chance of passing. I am optimistic.
Good. And let's break down the bill just a little bit more, right? So we talked about the piece of it that expands Desmond's law to include all companion animals, but it does more than that. There's also a piece of it that deals with stricter penalties for animal abuse, and it also creates a task force to study a few things. Joshua, do you want to kind of detail those parts of it?
Yeah. It makes some changes to insurance underwriting. At the start, it would have included both service animals and therapy animals in insurance underwriting so that no insurer is able to not insure tenants or landowners, I believe. I could be wrong there, based on the breed of dog. That language was substituted, and now it is only service animals and not therapy animals. The other portion is the increase in charges. It does a number of things, but essentially it just increases domestic animals in what the definition already is for like third degree assault or guilty of assault. In the third degree, it says when assault is happening against an elderly, blind, disabled, or pregnant woman, or a person with intellectual disability. And then this law includes or a domestic animal. So it really just increases the penalties for any violence against domestic animals, which we are strongly in support of. And then lastly, Animal Abuse Task Force can do a number of things. Task Force typically make their recommendations based on the members that are within the task force. When this bill is pushed along in the floor discussion, that's kind of when it's carved out like who will actually be appointed into this task force. Within the law, it says anywhere from studying the establishment of an animal abuse registry to making recommendations to revisions to the accelerated rehabilitation program. And so really that's just like at a minimum that is really open to a lot of options that they can explore. Any task force that has the opportunity to explore different types of things like that, we aren't supportive as well.
Beyond the task force studying AR, accelerated rehabilitation, there is a separate bill dealing with that, right, Joshua?
Yes, there is. That's a really good segue. The other bill is House Bill 5264. And this bill would limit accelerated.
Excuse me, is it 5566?
Yes, it is. No, 5264 is Desmond's law expansion. I just got it on my mind. It is House Bill 5566. Thank you, Linda. And that bill would limit accelerated rehabilitation in animal cruelty cases. Judiciary Committee definitely worked long and hard on this bill to figure out what a good compromise is in trying to ensure that meaningful consequences are applied for animal abusers. And so this bill would increase the amount of time that somebody can use AR again once it's used for an animal cruelty offense from 7 years to 15 years. So that's what it does. It expands the duration at which somebody can use AR again for animal cruelty. And sorry, Linda.
I don't want to contradict you, Joshua, and I'm not really sure where the 7 years comes from, because in the language of the AR statute, it says 10. And so I think, going from 7 to 15 years is significant. Going from 10 to 15 is still good, but it's not quite as significant as doubling.
I agree with you. The 7 came from conversations that we had with attorneys from the Judiciary Committee. And I agree with you that it is explicitly stated that it is 10 years within the AR statute. So regardless, 7 or 10, it is a change.
Yep.
CVA certainly believes that stronger changes can happen, and we're hoping that we can work with Judiciary Committee to make that happen. Those changes include defining what serious means within the statute. It said that AR cannot be used in crimes that are serious of nature, but then doesn't define what serious means, and so it leaves it up to the judge's discretion. And we would really like to ensure that across the board, serious is defined so that it can't be used in cases where a person beats their dog to death, right? But it is allowed in other instances where an accident happened and somebody left their dog in a hot car, And I think the perfect example of such a stark contrast in animal cruelty offenses is Desmond himself, right? And I know, Linda, you can certainly speak to this better than I can, but Desmond's abuser horrifically abused Desmond, ultimately strangled Desmond to death, but he received AR and he walked. We don't think that that should be possible. And so we want serious to be defined so that AR cannot be used in cases like that, because individuals like that are allowed to walk after receiving AR is what makes communities less safe.
Right. Yeah. I think that, the word intentional abuse should play a big part in that definition.
Yeah, I agree with you.
So really what this does is it resets like the cool down period, or it lengthens it rather. And we should just point out too that AR, accelerated rehabilitation, is only one diversionary program. The courts have others that they can use, but this is specifically dealing with accelerated rehabilitation. Joshua, I'll just say something and then you can choose to either comment on it or not comment on it, because I don't want to put you in a position where you can't say something. But my opinion is perhaps a legislator looked at this AR bill and we're a little bit gun shy about perhaps putting words in the judge's mouth or taking away discretion from a judge. That's what I think happened here, because we have 3 separate branches of government, for a reason: the judicial and the legislative and the executive. So I think the legislative branch may have seen this as a bit of an encroachment on the judicial branch. And so I think Joshua is spot on when he says the definition in statute of defining serious is going to be very important and key here. Am I on to something there, Joshua?
I agree with you. I think the legislature, and rightfully so, takes serious judges' discretion. They are judges for a reason. But what this bill does not remove judicial discretion. There are other definitions out there already for other types of serious crimes. This just ensures that across the board, judges are acting in the same manner so that consistency is preserved. And that's really what we want within our judicial system, is just consistency across the board.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Can we move to a different bill or?
Let me ask one more thing on that bill, please. Joshua, this increase in the length of time that a person applying for AR, I don't know what you call it, the setback period, if they haven't used it in the past 10 years, increasing to 15, that is not for all AR. That's only for people that are charged with animal cruelty. Am I correct?
You are on the nose. We don't know if this law passes as it is. We don't know what it will actually end up looking like. We aren't sure if somebody uses AR for the first time for, say, petty theft, if they need to wait 15 years to then use it for animal cruelty. And vice versa, if somebody uses it for animal cruelty their first time, we don't know if they need to wait 15 years to use it for petty theft or if they can just use it after 10.
Right.
And that's again.
Okay, so a little bit of a
some ambiguity there, some unknown for sure. And I think that if anything, any changes to the language of the bill as current could be to kind of clear that up, to again, just create some consistency across the board so that we know what it is this bill is actually doing. I think that would be extremely helpful.
Another bill, if we could just switch real quick here, that I know has the backing of Desmond's army, and I'm curious to see what CT Votes for Animals thinks about it, is HB 5283, retail pet shops, which I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Joshua, but this would allow municipalities to effectively ban these retail pet shops from opening up in their communities. This all came about, from what I understand, due to a pet shop that opened up in Danbury recently. And there's been others too, because New York put in place a law that bans these retail pet shops statewide. And so what we've seen is essentially an influx across the state line, especially, toward where pet shops are coming in Connecticut, because we don't really have any kind of a system to keep them out. And, people who know about pet shops know about the puppy mill pipeline and what that can do. So tell us what that bill does, what the status of it is, and what you guys think about it, Joshua.
So yeah, we are also in support of this bill. This bill doesn't ban across the state animals from selling, specifically dogs, cats, and rabbits. What it does, as you just said, Matt, it allows municipalities to make that decision for themselves. It essentially establishes local control on this topic. And I think that's necessary. At the end of last year, Stanford passed an ordinance that was overwhelmingly supported by their council, their city council. I forget. I don't remember. Town council. Yeah, we'll go with that one. And despite it being overwhelmingly supported, the mayor of Stanford ultimately vetoed this bill because of confusion around whether or not they had the authority from the state to actually enact such a ban. And uncertainty about municipal authority should not be what prevents communities from enacting such reforms, right? That just feels so silly and frivolous, right? And so this bill just makes it clear cut, says this is what municipalities are able to do. And for us at CVA, we strongly support this bill because it is a meaningful step towards a statewide ban. This bill allows municipalities to make that decision for themselves. And I know that this is a strongly supported position across the state. And so if we can get some municipalities on board with this ban, then we can go to the state in a year or so and say, look, X amount of municipalities have enacted this ban. I think it's time for the state to do it. So that's why we are in strong support of this bill.
So it sounds like what I'm hearing you say is that this is really a proof of concept bill. This is like, hey, let's give it a go. And then if it's working, we come back and we say, so that was kind of going to be my follow-up is, how come we don't just do a state ban right off the rip?
There is just no support for any proposal this year for a statewide ban. It came up last year. So did the local control bill. Both of these came up last year. Both ultimately died. But this go around talking with legislators, there was just not enough support to get the statewide ban bill proposed, but there was for the local control bill.
I think last year, the whole issue of the pet stores got very confused. I think that a lot of the public was confused by there being, I think there were 3 different bills last year. Am I right? I think there were 3.
There were many bills proposed initially, which that did not help with, making things less confusing. I remember 2, but I could be wrong. There were a lot of bills that we were tracking. I could be wrong. There could have been
Yeah.
3.
Yeah, I think it started with 3, maybe narrowed down to 2, but I know that there were many people very confused over, what is the difference between the bills? Why would I support giving municipalities the authorization when we have this bill over here that gives us a statewide ban?
Mm-hmm.
So I think the fact that this year there is only one bill will be very helpful with its success, hopefully.
Completely agree. Yeah, completely agree. And so far, this bill has been voted out of committee, and so it's off to a good start.
Yeah.
Certainly, the public needs to get their voices out and speak up to support this bill, but so far, so good.
Where does DOAG stand on this bill? Does anybody know?
No, I don't. I can't speak to their position last year either. I just don't remember.
Yeah. Yeah, because I think that was the obstacle that was standing in the way in Stamford, if I remember correctly. The council wanted it, and then the mayor said that it wasn't
Legal.
It wasn't legally allowed according to DOAG. So I just would be very curious as to where they stand on the bill. Okay. Yeah. And just obviously, the puppy mill pipeline, that's a story in and of itself, right? I mean, people say, oh, these puppies, they're so cute. And yeah, of course, they're cute. They're puppies. But it's all about, where they came from and how they're treated. And the USDA, as far as I understand it, has some sort of oversight on a lot of these breeders, but they're completely undermanned, understaffed, and all of their inspections are very cursory, and so there's a lot of issues that are pretty systemic when we're talking about pet shops. So this bill is a good start, but it certainly isn't going to solve everything. Rome wasn't built in a day, as they say, right? That's the thing with legislation. Okay.
We really need to educate people as to where they're buying their pets from. They don't know. Honestly, the public doesn't know where the pet stores are getting their animals from and what they're supporting and encouraging by buying an animal from them. And, even the employees at pet stores don't have a clue. They're told what to say by the franchise that owns them. You tell them that these puppies came from abusive situations or that they're from not abusive situations. That's other stores.
Amish breeders and things.
Yeah. From, we check out these breeders. They're really well cared for. This one only breeds their dog once every year. It's not true. It's really not true. And so we need to educate the public.
Yeah, we all want to know where we get our food from. We certainly should want to know where we get our animals from.
Yeah.
Oh, great point. Great point. 18. Anybody want to tee that one up?
You want to go for it, Linda, or you want me to?
Go for that one, Joshua.
I am upset with the current state of this bill. It is titled an act concerning animal welfare. And at the start of this legislative session, this bill would have required the state veterinarian to compile a list of placement options for companion animals of domestic violence survivors. So essentially, it would be removing a barrier for domestic violence survivors while they are attempting to flee by not having to leave their animal with the abuser. Right, because it is an established fact that abusers exploit that emotional connection that survivors have with their pets, and they use it as leverage to maintain the power and the control and that whole dynamic. So that's what this bill did at the start. This bill was voted out of committee with substitute language that rather than requiring the state veterinarian to create this list sometime at the end of this year, instead it now has the Commissioner of the Department of Agriculture work with the Office of Victim Services to study the need for such a list. And we don't need to figure out if the need is there. We know that the need is there. And it is really unfortunate that this bill was weakened so significantly. And I understand that it is the game of politics and sometimes that change needs to be made just for this bill to move forward. But in such a important and vital and for a bill that touches upon the safety of such two vulnerable populations, and facts are there, and you can reach out to the experts to see if this bill is actually needed.
The studies have already been done.
Yeah.
You don't need to study it further. It's an obvious need.
I have facts in front of me right here. 19% of domestic violence shelters nationwide allow survivors to bring their pets. 65% of domestic survivors report having a pet. Almost half of domestic violence survivors delay leaving the abusive situation out of fear for the safety of their animal. And 71% of domestic violence survivors report that their abuser previously harmed, killed, or threatened their pet. So all of that together just goes to show you that such a list is desperately needed. And I do think that weakening this language as much as had happened is just a true disservice to this population of people.
And just so everyone knows, Desmond's Army, definitely, we made this one of our mission goals. Our newest initiative is to pay for 1 month's boarding for animals of domestic violence survivors if they're going to a licensed shelter.
I think that's a tremendous plug because the resources are there. They are hard to find sometimes, but they are there.
Yeah. And we know.
And it goes back to, I think Joshua said it earlier, where you said, shout it from the rooftops. And you really do need to shout it from the rooftops, because when I bring this up to people, they'll even, people, if you're in the animal advocacy community like we all are, we understand it. We're educated on the link, but there are so many people out there who don't know the data proven connection between animal abuse and domestic violence. And so shout it from the rooftops.
Right. We did a survey earlier in the year that we wanted to learn a little bit more about the link and how familiar people were with the link and how many people have experienced the link themselves. And I watched, listen, I've never, thank goodness, right, knock on wood, never experienced domestic violence. And, I just don't really have any personal experience with it. But one of the questions on our survey was, have you ever had personal experience, or do you know somebody who has been affected by this link between animal cruelty and domestic violence? And as those results came in, I was like blown away. Oh my God, the amount of people who have experienced this was like, it blew my mind. And I think we neared 40% of the respondents to that question said, yes, I've experienced this myself, or, my family member experienced it. I was shocked by the amount of people who may be staying or may have stayed in a relationship longer than they should have for the sake of their animal. We need to step up and help those people.
Well said. That's well said. All right. Did we miss anything, guys? Because we're going to bring this ship into port real soon here.
There is one other component to Senate Bill 318 that I would like to just touch upon quickly, because the substitute language that significantly impacted the first part did not touch upon this. And this is a working group that would be established to study and make recommendations on how to improve Connecticut's animal population control program.
Yes.
And that is the program that provides vouchers for spay and neuters. It also helps to provide some, the word is eluding me, but it provides veterinarians with financial assistance too for performing these services. Right now, this program is not serving the communities and the population that it intends to. That's because the low income portion of the program is abruptly cut off once 20% of the entire program's annual income is allocated. And that happens incredibly quickly. So it leaves a lot of qualified applicants without the access to these services that they need. It also doesn't properly address the feral cat population crisis in Connecticut. Right now, it spreads it too thin across many different communities, and that prevents any meaningful or measurable impact on the feral cat overpopulation. And so instead, what CVA recommends is to address one community, target that community, help to curb the problem, and then move on. So even if that is a multi-year process, which it certainly would, at least in one community you are making an impact rather than spreading the money so thin across many that no impact can be. And there's a few other changes as well that we think this program should be made. But yeah, that is one portion of this bill that regardless of the placement options for companion animals, we're certainly going to be supporting this portion of the bill.
Great. I am going to give a plug to a bill. Well, actually, it's not even a bill yet. It's an idea. But bills start as ideas, as we know. That's how they start. And you guys may remember just a few weeks ago, this big story broke, speaking of cats, about a bunch of cats that were inside of a hotel in Windsor Locks that was shut down. And they were abandoned in there, no food, no water. So the group is now pushing for a concept that they call Bradley's Law, which would ensure that abandoned buildings are swept to make sure there's no living beings inside them after they're vacated or condemned. So that's what it would do, and seems pretty common sense to me. Make sure you check the building, make sure nothing's living in there, human or otherwise. And it could have avoided, if this was in place, a lot of trauma and tragedy for those cats who were left inside that hotel. So it's a concept, but certainly something that we would hope legislators would look at moving forward. Any thoughts on that?
I have some thoughts on that. Having been a realtor in the past and working on foreclosed homes, we would not be allowed. We would have to post a notice on the door because we wouldn't even know if the homes were vacant or not. Quite often they were, and we couldn't get in until we left the notice on their door for, I can't remember what it was, 3 or 6 weeks. But also in vacant homes, and I'm sure this is still going on, we have thieves that want to break in. They break into a basement window. They go in and they steal all the copper or whatever. And nobody's aware that they broke that window. And I can't tell you how many dead cats I've found. They get in and they can't get back out. So that whole issue runs pretty deep. There's also, the out-of-state landlords that have no clue what's going on in the homes that they are renting out or apartment buildings that they're renting out. They don't know if somebody's living there or if 20 people are living there. They just don't know. So it's a pretty big issue.
Yep. Yeah. All right. Well, I guess what we've learned from this episode is there's a lot of work going on in Hartford, and we're going to keep at it every day. Joshua is going to be there every day advocating for these very important bills. And I just want to say, and I'm sure, on behalf of Desmond's Army, all of us, we so value what you do. You really are a voice for the voiceless, Joshua, there under the gold dome. So keep at it. Keep pushing, of course, for HB 5264. And we thank you for coming on and lending your expertise. So thank you very, very much.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Thank you both for having me. I love to talk about this work. It's so vitally important that the message is spread. And I truly couldn't have done my work without the assistance of Desmond's Army and the resources that you guys have provided. So on behalf of CVA and on behalf of all of our members, thank you for the work that you do as well.
And speaking of resources provided, we have our Desmond's Army Legacy event quickly approaching on April 12th, and we have many wonderful community sponsors who are quite literally putting their money where their mouths are and making sure that we are supported. And one of those people was our guest today and CT Votes for Animals. So I just want to give all of our sponsors a quick shout out. And we're going to start with Connecticut Votes for Animals. So again, Joshua, tremendous, wonderful donation from your organization. Our hearts are grateful. Certainly. Thank you so much. As well as AMA Animal Rescue, Judith Clark, CWPM LC, MJ Augustini, Realtor for Remax, Connecticut Vegan Center Incorporated, Atria Larson's Place, Tilcon Corporation, Joyce and Glass PC, and last but not least, Karen Communications. We're throwing in a sponsorship as well. And Linda, did I miss anybody? You can still sponsor, right?
I think we have a couple potentials that we are going to add to the list. So we're going to keep our fingers crossed that a few more come through. This is a great event.
April 12th coming up at the Cadillac Ranch in Southington. Hoping everybody can join us. You can buy tickets and find all that information on desmondsarmy.org or on any of our social media pages. So again, thank you for tuning into episode 7, and we'll be back again with episode 8, a new story, a new guest. But again, thank you so much for joining us. Have a great day.
Bye-bye. Thank you, guys.